Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse, and you are on the Bible Forum. This is Sunday evening. It's about 5 minutes after 8 o'clock Eastern Time. We start at 8. I've been chatting with the folks who are gathered in the chat room and so forth. You could be part of that. But we are doing this every single Sunday night, whether you like it or not. We've been doing it since January of 2000. That means when we get to January of 2019, we will have finished 19 years. We're coming up on 20 years of doing this every single Sunday night, looking at life through a biblical perspective. We're looking at the news. We're looking at church events. We're looking at spiritual things, doctrinal issues, whatever it is, just doing my little piece here to try to solve all the world's problems in 2 hours or less. We love having you here as part and parcel of what we're doing. We're streaming from our website, thebibleforum.net. We're streaming from our Facebook page, the Bible Forum Facebook page. So you can watch live, or throughout the week we will post these things on both of those websites, including our YouTube page. And so you can go and look at that. This is a nonprofit ministry. It's a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. If you would like to contribute, we would love to hear from you. Just go online and you can figure out how to do that. If you don't have a PayPal account, shoot me an email. I'll give you the mailing address. We'll take a check. But we appreciate all that does come in every month. It keeps us on the air, as they say. You will get a tax receipt. Everything will work out just fine. You do realize today is Rosh Hashanah. Now, the timing is off. Israel is a long way off in the east. They are about, I don't know, at least 6, perhaps 8 hours ahead of us. And sundown was just a little bit ago. Maybe it's a little bit after 8 o'clock Eastern. So it's probably 8 hours ago that Israel began to celebrate Rosh Hashanah. This is the Jewish New Year. The words actually mean head of the year. This year, the world is recording 14.7 million Jews. Not all of them are celebrating Rosh Hashanah, but that is a tremendous increase over the last 50 to 60 years. You might have heard there was a major war back in the early 1940s that did away with at least 6 million of these folks. Just like the head controls the body, apparently actions on Rosh Hashanah have a tremendous impact on the rest of the year. In Rosh Hashanah prayers, it is written that on this day, quote, all inhabitants of the world pass before God like a flock of sheep, and it is decreed in the heavenly court, quote, who shall live and who shall die? Who shall be impoverished and who shall be enriched? Who shall fall and who shall rise? It is a day of prayer. It is a time to ask the Almighty to grant us, meaning the Jews, a year of peace, prosperity, and blessing. But it is also a joyous day when the Jews proclaim God King of the universe every year. I watched a video just recently, I think in the last week or two, that featured a man who was filming himself in order to make a point. He had a camera up over here. You could not see what he was doing. It was a little shot of him looking at a computer. But he did a couple of things so that you could see from overhead. He held up a sign with a word on it, a word that he was going to talk about, but a word that he was not going to say aloud. And then he began to go to various websites. And as he did, you get to see the websites that he is going to. And he went from one to another to the other. And occasionally he'd hold up the sign that said dog food. When he was finished with all of this, and it only took 5, 6, 8 minutes, whatever it was, he stopped, he shut his computer down completely, turned it off, and then turned it back on, booted back up. And as doing so, he went to these same websites that he had just visited. On each and every website were advertisements for dog food and for other pet-related items. For the most part, it was the same 3 pictures. He never said the word dog food. And none of these websites were selling dog food. But down the side, they run ads for everything. There was dog food. The lesson? If you don't need it, you might as well turn your sound off. Now your microphone, that's always only, but anything that might be collecting sound from you as you're wandering your house. I don't know. It was a little bit scary. The Charlotte Lozier Institute is a research group affiliated with the pro-life advocacy organization called Susan B. Anthony List. It released recently an 80-page report on the pro-life pregnancy centers across the nation that provide free services to 2 million people every year. They were claiming that they had saved communities $161 million in costs. How is that possible? It is possible because these people did not abort their children, and it didn't cost them that much money to keep their kids. The enemies of life are not going to like any of this, but I think it's going to continue and increase, and I hope it does. Were you watching any of the Supreme Court judge hearings this week? You might have seen freshman Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey. He's a Democrat. He was given time to ask questions of the candidate. Instead, he took his time accusing the Republican leadership of withholding important documents, claiming they released only 10% of the candidate's writings. Now, Senate Majority Whip John Cornyn from Texas, a Republican, called Booker out during the hearing to make a spectacle in order to boost his 2020 chances. According to Cornyn, the document that Booker made a fuss about releasing publicly had actually already been submitted to the committee earlier in the morning. Senator Booker fired back, telling the Independent Journal Review that the documents were not cleared for committee confidential when his staff released them. Booker said Cornyn's harsh criticism ignored the merits of his argument. What was his argument? His argument is we don't have enough of a paper trail to know who this man really is. This after more information had been released regarding this candidate than any candidate in history. So who is Cory Booker? Well, Booker's a Democrat senator from New Jersey who resides in New York. I believe he keeps a home of record in New Jersey, but a couple of years back there was a whole big hoorah about this, and it was clear he owned property in New York and he lived in New York. He very seldom was in New Jersey. He also was formerly mayor of one of the most corrupt cities in the United States. We're talking Newark, New Jersey. Booker's a maverick Democrat, not always following the herd. is also firmly against President Trump, and it doesn't matter where President Trump is standing. He's looking at running for president in the future, and it's been reported that he's crafting his resume as a staunch defender of the forgotten and or the misused. Of course, he's doing this often without regard to reality or truth. For example, he was critical of President Obama's campaign for attacking Mitt Romney and Bain Capital, calling them nauseating and declaring he was not about to sit here and indict private equity. Just that later on it was learned that over $500,000 had been donated to Mr. Booker's Senate campaign from the finance industry. So what? So he's a politician first. Apparently a people's advocate second. And are we surprised? No. In 2017, Politico magazine published an article entitled "The Newark Mirage." It said 2 terms of Booker's mayoralship had nothing close to progress to show. A decrease in crime was offset by a following increase. A decrease in employment, more than 11%, was double the national average. New businesses were brought in, but few jobs went to Newark residents. He tried to privatize the water system only to get bogged down in accusations of corruption and mismanagement. Booker was eventually named as a defendant in a lawsuit related to his many failures. His claim to fame was the effort to implement a widespread charter school voucher system. Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg gave $100 million to this particular effort. The citizens, the parents, the voters in the Newark area, they knew nothing and were absolutely surprised. Oh, and they were left out. An old Russia playbook says, accuse your enemy of what you are doing or want to do. You see, this is politics. And it's always been the same. But for some reason, we continue, well, to be surprised. And some of us continue to be influenced by it in a positive way. It's very sad. Unemployment rates dropped to the lowest levels since 1969 recently, showing a large improvement in the economy. According to The Hill, the Labor Department reported that unemployment claims fell to 203,000 for the week ending September 1st, which is lower than the 1969 number of 204,500. The unemployment rate is also expected to stay in the mid 3% range. You may have watched some of the Sunday news shows. Bob Woodward was featured in at least one. I think it was NBC's. He may have just been making the rounds. You remember Bob Woodward, Nixon era, Woodward and Burns, I believe it was, and their expose. Pat Buchanan wrote a piece this week about the Washington Post leak. You saw the leak, did you? Someone close to the president apparently is not happy and is trying to undermine everything he's doing, and they're telling everybody. The article said that the Washington Post leaked excerpts from Bob Woodward's new book, attributing to Chief of Staff John Kelly and General James Mattis crude remarks on the president's intelligence, character, and maturity, describing the Trump White House as a crazy town led by a 5th or a 6th grader. Now, the men in question, Kelly and Mathis, both denied making the comments. If you're paying any attention at all, there's actually a gallery of photographs online of the men and women closest to the president who have officially denied that they are the author of this peace or that they are upset or share this person's views. There's nothing in the article that any of these men said they didn't already know about President Trump. The man is the most transparent president in terms of what he thinks and what he has ever seen or heard than anybody you probably know. But Woodward's book is now at the top of the New York Times bestseller list because it has just sold so many copies. No. Speaking as one who worked in the book industry for 5 years, I can tell you that the New York Times list is a joke. It comes out weeks ahead, sometimes before the book is even published. People who follow it know that it isn't current. It's not about how many books are sold. It's about what the New York Times leadership believes is important, is significant, is what they think you ought to be reading. It's what the publishers are paying to get on the list. Oh, they don't say it. You know it's happening. The word artificial doesn't fully define the bestsellers list. An anonymous insider's view of the White House? It's an all too obvious attempt at another deep throat expose. None of the quotes are given attribution. Woodward is simply saying, trust me. What he sees here is the ramping up of something he doesn't think is good. What we see is the ramping up of the socialist effort to overthrow America's democratically elected head of state. Watch it. It'll get bigger and fatter and more obvious as the days go on. Don't be surprised at the conclusion. Scotland's been in the news in recent months for several efforts to make it easier for people to change their gender, change their sex, they call it. Most recently, a plan was proposed to let people simply self-identify as either a man or a woman or something else. They don't say what. Alleviating these poor souls from any obligation to undergo counseling and or treatment. The most extreme supporters of that idea have proposed an option for children to be allowed to change their sex on their birth certificate, even if their parents object. The Scottish Daily Mail has reported that, quote, Scottish councils are proposing that state snoopers should be allowed to help children legally change their gender if parents are at odds over the issue. Under the self-identity plan, children who are 16 years of age could change their own birth certificates. Currently, you have to be 18. Some have suggested calling it the Failed Named Persons Program. This is where our culture is going. No, we're not Scottish. Trust me, it's coming. It's already here. We are trying to fulfill every perversion and perverted idea that any human being can come up with so that nobody feels that they're different. I like being different. How about you? We're going to take a break. If you have something you'd like to discuss with me, a question, a comment, call me. 843-666-1154. As they say in the trade, the lines are open.